Now 6 p.m. on Thursday, August 14th. We have a quorum of council members. I'd like to call this meeting Rhome City Council to order. I'd like to ask everybody to please silence your cell phones, if you would please, for the remainder of the meeting. All right, at this time, would you please rise for the invocation? Father, thank you for this day. We ask your blessing on this meeting and lead, guide, and direct us to do what's good in your sight. We ask that you watch over all of our police and fire and other public service, Father. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor takes the flag. Pledge allegiance to the United States, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Right, amen. All right. All right, moving on, we do have a public comment, but he's asked to please refer to item number C of the regular agenda.
B.
Let's actually see. All right, well, for the announcements, next, we do have a regular P and Z meeting on September the 8th. Coming up at 6 p.m. And then the first city council meeting in September will be on the 11th, September the 11th. And I believe we have an announcement from council member Loftus.
Yes, the Rhome Community Library has its 65th anniversary this year. And about 65 years ago, we had a group of 16 to 18 ladies that decided to form the library. And then through the end of the year, they collected books from private collections to establish the original collection for the library. So we're going to have a celebration event on September 20th, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. is the plan right now. And then we will continue with a fundraising campaign through the end of the year in an attempt to raise $20,000 to fund a circulation desk staff position. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. There are no other announcements from council. We want to the consent agenda. At this time, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Moving on, thank you. Do we have some monthly staff reports?
Yes, we do have one from Chief Balkinselli.
Where's yours, sir?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So the Rhome Police Department this month, for the month of July, and for a total of 871 calls for service. Of those, most of them were non-collision related accidents. We had some, non-collision traffic related incidents. We did have a total of 19 accidents, 12 of which involved injury accidents. We also had the pleasure of going to the Rhome Public Library to be engaged in their summer reading event. We really had a good time with the kids. We kind of, we all had the impression that we were going to be reading, to the kids. When we got there, we found out that it was kind of a show and tell event. The kids had a great time. They asked a lot of good questions. The parents asked a lot of good questions. They really enjoyed playing with the patrol car and all the lights and noises that it makes. So it was really an enjoyable time for all of us. I also want to report that we have submitted a grant application to the Firehouse Subs Public Safety Foundation. And in that grant, we're requesting funding for personal and mass casualty medical related kits, as well as the necessary training materials to support those kids. We've also started the process of upgrading our body armor to the Angel Armor system, and this will provide the officers with additional protection and capacity for a faster response. Mayor, I believe you were there when we had it all laid out on the table. It's kind of come a long way since the old days, huh?
Oh, yeah.
And then the last thing is a couple of sessions ago, you guys approved some of my policies, and some of those policies involved records for TCOL and personnel management and stuff. We were recently audited by TCOL on our personnel files, and I'm happy to report that we had 0 deficiencies, so we got a perfect evaluation.
If there's anybody else out there who does not know what Angel Armor is, when you wear your body armor and your vest, usually there's this plate that goes one in the front, one in the back, and them suckers were heavy. I mean, very heavy and hot. So this new armor these guys can wear will reduce the bulk of the equipment they have to wear, and this stuff's light as a feather, and it'll stop M16 round. So it's a lot better for them, and it'll definitely an improvement.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
All right, moving on to the regular agenda. Item number A, a discussion and any necessary action for the amended plat for Blue Stem Phase 2.
Thank you, Mayor. Brooke is actually going to present that information for us this evening. She has worked on that and taken these 2 items to discussion with the Planning and Zoning Commission, but we've got a couple presentations, or should I say maps, to show you as it relates to the layout. One of these is simply a change, very ministerial change as far as square footage, and one of these is simply no change, but it requires council approval to get to the final plat stage. So while Brooke's pulling up her information, I thought I'd give you a little background, and I'll turn it over to her.
Good evening. This right here is the Blue Stem amended plat. All they did was change, they had the wrong lot size on 3 of their lots when we approved the final. So they've made an amendment just to put the correct lot size on those lots. Nothing else has changed.
Did they increase or decrease the size?
I believe it was an increase. It was just a typo on their end.
Any other questions on that? We would need a vote from council to approve that.
What was the recommendation for P and Z?
It was
Yes.
to approve, yes.
Thank you very much. All right, if there's no more discussion, do I have a motion to approve the amended plat for Blue Stem Phase 2?
I make a motion to approve the amended plat for Blue Stem Phase 2.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. All right, thank you. Motion carries.
And like we were saying before, Mayor, the second one here, the final plat for the Gonzalez edition, it is the exact same thing that you approved as a preliminary plat. There have been no changes to it, so we're happy to pull it up, but
Yeah, the only change is they changed this to final plat instead of preliminary, and that is it.
And P and Z.
Yes.
yes, sir.
All right. Is there any discussion from council? Question? All right, if no questions, do I have a motion to approve the final plat for the Gonzalez edition?
I make a motion to approve the final plat for the Gonzalez edition.
I have a second. Second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number C, update from Kimberly Horn on our bond projects. Amanda, please take.
Thank you, Mayor. We do have several representatives from Kimley Horn present this evening, and they've given us a slide deck that Brooke's going to pull up for you that relates to the 3 items that were approved by the voters in May of last year. We have the update on the West wastewater treatment plant, on the water well drilling, as well as the sanitary sewer lines. And I will leave it at your discretion, Mayor, for the agenda, whether you want to do our public.
Well, I was gonna let
Yet, or Kimley Horn.
I was gonna have our citizen presentation first.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Easton, floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, man. Can you hear me?
Pull it up a little bit. There we go.
Can you hear me now? Okay. My name's Sam Easton. I live at 1107 Mount Lane. I've lived here for a dozen years. I want to know what's going on with Kimley Horn because these, got the bond approved over a year ago. I realize you didn't really get to start until October, but it's not like we're putting somebody on the moon, guys. What's taking so long? Right? I mean, is this some kind of magic, brand new kind of wastewater treatment plant that nobody's ever done before? I really hope y'all have something similar to this in a file already existing, so you can just take it out, make a few changes, and there's a design. Right? No? I mean, what's taking so long? We need this. We have businesses that wanna move in. We have people that wanna flush their toilets. Okay, have you seen the poop coming out of the, right? This is costing us money. And then all this big delay, prices are going up if you haven't noticed. That's costing us money. We need y'all to do something. Are y'all doing something? Or are you gonna tell us, here's another excuse and we're not moving forward? Right? Do you have answers, positive answers for us tonight? Or is it just, here's the can, we're kicking it down the road? Okay, guys, please give me good news. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. All right, Sir, I believe the floor will be yours.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so we're gonna give a couple of updates on the bond projects tonight. Starting out with the West Sanitary Sewer Main projects. So we have advertised all of the West Sanitary Sewer Mains. It's currently going through the bidding process right now. And we are on track to open bids on August 21st. So we've had a few questions, we fielded those, answered them, nothing overly complicated, or any real issues that have come up on that so far. So looking at that schedule, we have gotten the TxDOT permit approved, so that was good news. No issues there. Like I mentioned, we're opening bids on August 21st. We're planning to bring that to council, I think right now, August 28th. If not the very first council meeting of September, and then we would quickly be working towards a notice to proceed afterwards. The contract days that we've allowed in the contract is approximately 10 months. And the timing on some of that has more to do with making sure that shop drawings are properly reviewed and ordering materials. So most of the construction itself is not overly complicated, but there is a timing component to getting materials in. Any questions on the sanitary sewer mains?
It's saying the bid opening is August 21st. Is that normal to have such a short window of bid? Okay, is that, you're waiting for people to submit their bids, correct? It's just for 1 week?
No. So we advertise on August 2nd, yeah. So typical timeline for that, you advertise again, you're required by state law to advertise twice. So you advertise, you wait a week, you advertise again. Sometimes if you want to hold a pre-bid meeting, then you would hold that pre-bid meeting the following week. And talking with city staff, we didn't feel like that was necessary on this project. You skip a week and then you open after. So usually it's around 3 to 4 weeks total.
Okay, so that's normal then. 3 or 4 weeks, that's normal.
Absolutely. Everything that we're doing from an advertisement timeframe has been like your standard for a project.
Okay.
And then, as we'll discuss with the West plans, if the bids don't come in where we need them, then we reject the bids and there's another process. They've done some things behind the scenes to help on the West plant to hopefully get us a better number. And once Mr. Bailey gets into that, it'll kind of explain some of this process. It's all of these bids and all of these projects are being affected by the fact that we are not the only city in North Texas that are in this process, nor are we the only one that's bidding for this from a private view. We've got a lot of MUDs, there's a lot of special districts that have popped up all across the state. And unfortunately, the bidding pool is not as large as we would like. So we're kind of in the crosshairs of several different issues, but we will get into more depth with you as we go through that tonight.
Any other questions on the sanitary sewer project? Okay. Moving on the water well improvements project. We are currently wrapping up final design. We're ready to submit for TCEQ permitting. So process wise, we'll kind of run through this real quick. On a well design, because you don't know what you're actually going to produce, you go through a process of bidding the project, the well gets constructed, and then on the back end, once you actually know what the testing results are for the well, then they finalize some of the pumping, and then you do your final permitting for your capacities with TCEQ. So it's a two-phased approach on the way that it's set up. And so we'll be doing the majority of the construction on the front end, but then we come back around and you have to do the TCEQ use permitting before you can actually put the wells fully in service as part of it.
Batteries are not always your friend when it comes to microphones, so bear with us as we change that out right quickly. We're very fortunate that Al does pick up a better sound, but it does help for people in this room too as well for the discussion. So we'll let Mr. Dominguez change those out.
Yeah, so like I was mentioning, we are planning on advertising, on August 29th for this project as well. So, the bidding process will basically wrap up in September. It will have a very similar schedule to what we had for, the sanitary sewer improvements. And then at the same time, we'll be running some of the TCQ permitting concurrent with that as well. Any questions on the wells?
So ads start August 29th.
I believe if that's a Saturday, then yes,
So then we,
The 29th is a Friday.
then they would start on the 30th.
okay, so then they run for 2 weeks, a week, then maybe a week off, or a week of something else. And then the 4th week is when the bid is awarded.
And typically we do that towards the end of the week to give almost a full 2 weeks after the advertisement is gone. So again, nothing overly crazy. So what I'll caveat about advertisement schedules and the bidding process in general is depending on the complexity of the facility or something like that. Sometimes the advertisement schedule gets longer when there are fewer components that a contractor is bidding on, then that time frame ends up, this is kind of a standard time frame. So
One of the things, Kyle, if you could kind of explain as well, some of the behind the scenes, just very quickly. Staff, you had to work with staff to determine well locations that would fit within our CCN as well as be far enough away from other wells that we know that are being drilled in our vicinity. Can you elaborate on that just shortly?
yeah, so there is a huge component to designing a water well that's more closely related to permitting with the groundwater conservation district. So they are the ones who control where groundwater is permitted to drill and where it's not. So early on in the process, a big part of the design was first establishing where you could even put a well. And then on top of that, based on proximity to other wells, the depths that you would be allowed. So what I'll say about that is there are standard spacing requirements. That would be the ideal. If there are wells that fall within that, depending on how far away they are from your proposed location, then the groundwater authority may limit your flow. The closer you are, the more that are within your proximity, the more your flow gets limited. So a big part of this is it's a puzzle piece to say, all right, if we put a well here and we drill it deeper here and get more out of it, are we too close to another? Do we want to acquire property or not? All of those different components went into it. And so the goal here was to avoid property acquisition, which we've done in this case. And then also understanding which aquifers you want to tap into based on depth, based on proximity to other wells, to maximize the production rate that you would get. And that's the goal out of it, right? You want to get as much water as possible. So we did spend a lot of time on the front end of this project in particular, working with the groundwater conservation district to understand what we could do, what we couldn't do, as well as making that permitting process smoother.
So while this one might seem like it's certainly the more straightforward of the 3 projects, at the beginning, we did have a little more labor intensive review, working with that groundwater conservation district to make sure that we were in all of those parameters that Kyle described. We also had some conflicts with the PMB projects and the wells that they're drilling, so we had to look at some additional sites there as well. So it's been a what would normally seem of the 3 projects that we let for the most straightforward. This one has actually had a few hiccups that took a little longer on the front end to get it going.
The other thing that I'll add to all of that as well is that as part of the design of these, since we're proposing at the FM 3433 site and your existing well 5 site, those are our 2 locations. There's some cleanup on those sites that needed to happen as well. I don't know if any of y'all have been out to the FM 3433 site. It sits on a big hill. So when you're talking about drilling a well, and making all of that happen, they need certain, areas that are level. But then you're also thinking about, okay, long-term, what makes the most sense for this site, from the city's perspective? If it needed to be expanded, if you needed to build a new tank, any of those types of things that come up and that are really critical when you're thinking about your facility sites and maximizing those, is all part of the planning process when we're going through that. So I tell people this all the time. You can spend a lot of time rushing through things and getting something done very quickly, or you can take a step back and have the time to fully think through it and have a very logical and clear cut plan to make sure that you don't hose yourself on the future. And I would argue that the city of Rome would often find that they have been hosed for future projects based off of things that have happened in the past. So a big part of the process that we are going through on all of these projects and any project that we come to the table with, is to think through what are the possible pitfalls going into the future. Sometimes there's a little bit of a pause that needs to happen for that to be the case. So before Chris moved, well, any other questions on the water wells?
With all the delays and hiccups, is this still gonna stay within our bond money?
Currently, right now, the way that we plan this, we've been working with well drillers to understand pricing and everything on those. And right now, we're feeling comfortable about where the pricing is falling on the wells. What I'll say is that, you know, there's, in some of these cases, there's an ideal number in the production rate that you get out of it. And so what we've done is, the deep wells are direct, they're directly reflected by the depth of the well for the price. And one of the things that we learned early on when we were thinking originally that we would just drill as deep as we could to get the maximum production, the reality is that you weren't going to be able to get the max production out of that anyways because of the proximity to other wells. And so we spent time looking at the cost benefit to that to understand if we do this depth here, it will be cheaper. We could squeeze another one in, and the production rate is anticipated to still be within what the groundwater conservation district even allowed to begin with. So instead of drilling, only 2 really deep wells, we're drilling 1 deep well and 2 shallower wells. And the goal there, again, is to maximize the bond money that you had out of this. And to be quite frank, that's been the goal the entire time. We've set up a lot of things in the way that the bids are framed out so that you have what you need. And then there are alternatives for additional things if there's money left over for it. And the bids have been set up so that you can cut if for some reason pricing came in too high, or if it came in lower, you could come back and look at some other options. And we've already been coordinating with Jesus on some of those things, especially on the sanitary sewer projects. We're anticipating some to be looked.
You're saying that we can't get as much water because of the proximity to the other wells. Is that because it's restricted by the groundwater conservation?
That's correct. Yeah. Basically what happens is, so again, when you're drilling in a certain area, they have all kinds of models that they look at. And so when we went to them, we basically said, here's the locations we're considering. What would your anticipated production rates be at different aquifer depths? And they go through and say, yeah, maybe this one would do 150 GPM and this one would do 50 GPM. But say you could get the 150, because of the proximity of another well, they may limit it to 80 no matter what. And so that is the balancing act that we went through to figure all of those things out. Now, the other thing that I'll add to that is, again, this has to tie back into your system. So it is not as simple as saying, oh, we want to go and pick that site because we're outside of the well radius. If now all of a sudden you're going to have to acquire the property, and then acquire easement and then construct however many linear feet of water line because you still have to tie it back in, right? So all of those things get weighed and taken into account. We worked closely with staff during that process to make sure that we were balancing as much as we could. So something, again, this all goes back to something that seems relatively simple in theory, actually has a lot more complexities to it, and that takes a lot of planning to go into it before you can do the design.
And if everybody doesn't realize, this is our near-term solution to help us bridge the gap in our water problems, and we gotta get this right. So with these new wells to augment our supply, plus getting a new water tower in for our storage capacity and to maintain pressure so we can also do maintenance work on our system. This will get us over the hump till the Mayor's Coalition of Wise County can get this public utility agency stood up and we can get our project done to bring water in here from Eagle Mountain Lake to give us long-term water security. So we got to get the water wells right. And there's a million straws already stuck down in the ground, especially with all this development going on and all this stuff out in the county where everybody's brother drills a well. So yeah, it's complicated. You know, anything a city does is like running uphill and knee-deep molasses. It's gonna take forever. So we got to do it right. I know it's taking forever, but once we do it right, this will go a long way to securing the water supply for Rome and the quality of water for Rome. It is what it is.
I agree with what the mayor's saying, and I appreciate you saying that. I also appreciate Kyle's frankness in talking about and calling out the things that got us here in the first place. You know, we have as a city, whether or not we were sitting in these same chairs as a city, there have been poor decisions, or we like to say the can's been kicked down the road plenty of times, and now we're kind of facing the consequences of that. And we do have to go slow to go fast, right? The hours that we spend in planning and decision-making is going to pay off in the long run. It's frustrating for citizens. It's frustrating for businesses. It's frustrating for developers, but it's a natural part of being in a fast growth area.
I do want to add it, as Ms. King says, it is frustrating also on our end. There have been a lot of challenges, as Kyle knows. One site needs dirt work, another needs the proximity of wells are too close. Infrastructure at another site, we don't have water lines, tanks, etc. Which has been real careful, and as Kyle said, we've been thinking about the future and trying to do things right and choosing what's best for the city long term. So
I could just say there's several ways to get to your end result. Some of it is with the planning, the making sure that you're meeting industry standards so that you are going to hand this off to the next set of council team or the next set of staff team to pick it up in 5, 10, 15 years and keep going with it. If we take the shortcuts, which may seem logical, may even seem more cost effective from the standpoint of let's just contact a water well driller and let's just run with it. Especially you can't always take what works in the private sector or in your personal life and apply it to a municipality. And that's the thing that as we continue to grow as a city, that we're streamlining with our processes internally, that we're streamlining with our entirety of our city service delivery methods, because we've got to prep for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. We cannot just look 1 to 5 years out. And we've struggled somewhat because we had limited funds. There was not necessarily development that was knocking at our door. We weren't right in the crossroads of the Metroplex. I mean, it was coming, but it hadn't gotten here. Well, we're there now. And so we've got to take the time to make sure that we are hitting all those industry norms and standards so that we don't, to Kyle's point, find ourselves in a bad position in the future.
Okay, so before Chris digs into some of the things going on, specifically with the West wastewater treatment plant, I do want to address a few things that I heard earlier on, and I think we've heard a couple of times that are arguably misconceptions. So one thing that I will start out saying is typical design timeframe for a treatment plant is anywhere from 9 to 18 months, maybe even longer than that. One of the things that I'll say that I'm going to talk about Chris and his team, they did this in just a little over 6 months. That's busting butt for projects like this. So to say that we've been sitting on this and not really been doing much is borderline an insult, because frankly, that is not what's been the case. So I understand that there's frustration surrounding this, but the design process and the timeframe to do this takes quite a bit. From the permitting perspective alone, when we start talking about what you have to do with TCEQ and making sure that we're meeting all of those requirements, you can easily eat up 6 months or more on that alone. And so when we start thinking about the challenges that your West wastewater treatment plant is facing, again, this kind of goes back to the idea that the goal is to utilize the existing infrastructure, to utilize the existing site, and to maximize the dollars that the city has. Now, there are things that are outside of our control, and Chris is going to talk about a little bit those here in just a minute. But I do want to reiterate that from a design perspective, we are well within a standard or typical, and actually even better than what most other firms would provide for something like this. And while it is considered a package treatment plant, there is nothing package about it. Everything is designed specifically to the site. And again, this goes back to making sure that we're not only setting you up for what is happening today, but for the future expansions that TCEQ is going to require as you bring on new development, and making sure that you have the ability to expand and move those forward in the future. So I just want to make that crystal clear. I know there's lots of opinions about the job that we're doing and how we're doing that, but I can sit here and firmly back up what is being done on our end and what our team has done. And I will stand by that. I'm more than happy to have an off-record conversation with anybody who wants to talk about it. So I'll leave it to Chris.
Okay, so the wastewater treatment plant, just kind of backing up a little bit, and July 2nd, we opened bids on the West wastewater treatment plant. And just to be, clear, the bond money for that project was $10 million. The bids came in, low bidder was 3.4 million over budget. And so that to us, I mean, we immediately I talked to the city and said, give me a week to get with the contractors to give me a better understanding, like where that numbers came from and understand. So the basic breakdown of that is just the three big buckets items is electrical. And so electrical, the contractors that bid the project, they're general contractors. And so they have to go out to the streets and get services that they don't provide themselves. So in this case, electrical was the big component. And so what we ended up finding after talking with all of them is behind the scenes, only one electrical contractor was giving the prices out. So that didn't give enough competition on the electrical side. And so that caused the prices to skyrocket when they realized that they were the only ones playing that on this bid. And so again, back to the Amanda's point was just the amount of competition right now in the Metroplex. I mean, those guys were pulled to other directions. And so that's the nature of the electrical there. And so the other big portion was the mechanical pieces, it's the amount of steel on the project. And so since these things are above grade steel tanks, they were hit with a bunch of tariffs. And that was part of just the prices that at the end of the day, when we were working with the bond projects first, we didn't know tariffs were going to exist. And so working with them, we understood where was that put, what was that money, understood. And then the site civil work, just like we're talking about, like Kyle said, we're on the existing site, we're working near the creek. The creek is pretty silty, expansive clays. We put the design just to make sure that infrastructure is going to last the city for the long haul and not sink or fall around. There's quite a bit of material that's removed off site and new material put under the basin so that does not expand anymore and change and in effect Jesus in the long run. And so working through that, we met with the city the week after that to kind of talk through what we found from the contractors. And so we had to come back and kind of find, okay, how are we going to bring this project back into budget? What are we going to change to make this happen? And so first off the bat, what we changed was the process from biological to chemical to reduce the amount of electrical equipment on the project. And so this was just a big piece just to attack the electrical. The next was to attack the steel portions, and we removed the EQ basins, but as well kept without removing capacities. The EQ tanks don't give you any capacity. They allow you to, for larger peaks in your coming in your facility. We plan for that in bigger basins downstream to help long-term with the overflow pieces. So that's the goal for the city. And additionally, we brought in more manufacturer competition. So we are working currently right now to have manufacturers be prepared and multiple vendors come in and compete. So the day of the bids, we found that all the contractors went to one manufacturer instead of going after multiple manufacturers. So increasing that competition to basically drive down the price is what that goal is there. And then back to the soil portion, a lot of that soil that we talked about has to get removed out of the basins to make it stable. We worked with Jesus and he said, hey, we are trying to actively fill the lagoons on the east plant, on the closed facility side. So we said, hey, contractors, instead of you guys having to pay tipping fees and haul that off a long distance, let's give me that back and let's take it to the lagoons and we'll win on that side as well. So for the city, instead of saving in the long haul. So those are the design changes there. So kind of bringing us to today. Today we have, as well, after that discussion with the city, we did reject all the bids. Obviously they're out of budget, so we gained the information we needed to from the contractors, and we're moving forward today with our goal is to re-advertise on August 28th, so about 14 days time from here, and then go through that same process that Kyle talked about, allow the 4 weeks to go to September 25th, to have that another pre-con meeting because of the design changes, and then award that next council meeting is October 9th, and then start construction. And construction, like Kyle said, just the complexity of the amount of components going into it, and long lead times of equipment, that's 15 to 18 months of construction. I'll take any questions on the wastewater plant.
Well, to put it in layman's terms that people like me can understand, what I'm hearing, there's so much work in this area right now. Contractors can basically pick and choose what they want to do. And if anybody's tried to buy anything lately or build anything lately, the price of materials has gone through the roof. And it's unreal how much stuff costs now. It's tripled. And yes, I think we're doing everything we can do to get this done. Nobody had a crystal ball 2 years ago to know that all this was gonna happen, but yeah, things been done better. Yeah, I think they could have. We got a little leaning forward in foxhole a little bit earlier. Yeah, but we didn't. So now we gotta fix it. So I think we're doing everything we can right now. We're gonna get it done. It's just gonna, like anything else around here, it's gonna take time. So that's how I see it.
So it sounds like the electrical, they were pretty much price gouging us. Like that, because they were the only job, they were the only people bidding on this job.
They don't have to. Everybody's got so much work, they can choose.
So
Yeah, at the end of the day, let's just say even the bids did come in like under budget. Yeah, I think I'd still have a hard time moving forward with the project because of how high and how outrageous that was. Like we would probably just remove the project and maybe just bid electrical or something like that, but it was out of line. Ultimately for us, like what our goal right now is we are already effectively reaching out to those electrical contractors that would tag team with those GCs to basically bring in more local people and say, hey, make sure you're aware. We haven't advertised yet, but I'm just putting it on the radar and making sure that they know it's coming. So.
And so I'm assuming other city, y'all work with all sorts of cities. Are any other cities having this issue?
Yeah, this is not a one-off issue across the Metroplex by any means. This is happening just all over. Ultimately right now, Texas, the development is just crazy, booming. Population is going crazy in the Metroplex. It's definitely, I think in a day, we're just a shortage of labor or a shortage of craftsmanship. And that's what's driving that market.
What kind of brand of estimating software does Kimley Horn use?
Yeah, well, we do not use a software, I guess, to,
And how do you estimate the cost?
yeah, so I think, I mean, when we're, you know, at the end of the day, we are engineers, we have to go, you know, work with the people that actually do the cost estimate. So we work with the contractors, we help, we look at our past projects, we have relationships from the past. And that's
So you're not really familiar with the costs of, current costs of making anything. You have to depend on the contractor to do that, correct?
So I would say a caveat a little bit, just making sure I understand here, is like for equipment, piece of vendor, like hard pieces of items. Absolutely, we're going straight to the manufacturers that make these things and saying, what number are you putting on the streets, right? What's your most current price? When we're getting the most current things that we can't control, the one thing we don't control is when a contractor bids and says, here's my labor today.
Well, I suspect your contractors are using some estimating software that has regularly updated pricing so that they can get an accurate estimate, so they can make the profit they need. So I don't understand why you don't have some sort of higher level software that would give you the same type of result. Sounds like you're just working from a spreadsheet to me, from what you answered.
I think that's our frustration is we look to y'all to be the subject matter experts, and then our bid is, and we can't control tariffs, and we can't control, and y'all aren't gonna know that, but it is frustrating because the citizens are looking at us going, well, are you kidding me? What are y'all doing with this? You know, and so then we look like we're incompetent. And then we have to look at y'all to go, well, hey, what do we need to do? And y'all are the ones giving us the information. So I think that's what our frustration is at this point.
Let me just say something about the way that we go through our estimating process. So we very much follow industry standard when we're going through that process.
A spreadsheet.
It's a combination of several things, but yes, absolutely. There's a piece of that we are estimating that cost. It's our OPCC. It is based off of pricing from manufacturers. We're working with contractors to understand pricing, and then recent bids across multiple systems.
But you have no consolidated database of current pricing from these people.
Well, I'm not quite sure what a consolidated database of current pricing would provide us when every project is very specific. So,
Well, it allowed you to make your estimate more accurate.
okay. Well, again, this all goes back to things that are outside of our control when we're going through that. And I think regardless, when estimates were provided 2 or 3 years ago when the bonds were set, prices have increased since then, and we're in a very different spot now.
To me, it sounds like a management decision issue not to pursue that type of software and use it.
Well, I appreciate
That's what it
your
sounds
feedback.
like to me.
Appreciate your feedback.
Sure.
I think just a little bit to that as well, just as we ultimately, we do what we can to help with that. There are places that we do get that data and help with that stuff. So I think at the end of the day, it's just, yeah. Okay, so, any other questions?
Can you kind of give me an idea of any projects you are working on right now where it has gone above like a city bid, you know, like y'all have got bonds for the city, the bonds have come through and then it's been overbid? All the time? Does that happen all the time?
Yes, I mean, not all the time, but it does happen because there are things that are outside of their control. So the hard part is with a bond, we're looking at a moment in time. When, you know, when we went out for the bond, I don't know how many months ahead of the election we had to have those figures, but I feel like it was 4 to 6 at least. And then nobody could have projected the state of the economy now. Nobody could have projected the tariffs. Nobody could have projected even that this area would be booming the way it has. So I think we have to give a little bit of grace, and I feel you. But yes, it happens. I saw it in the school district where things would come back. put out for bids, and then we have to come back and reevaluate the project. So it sounds like they've done their due diligence.
It's just when we do get the price for the bonds, I feel like there should be some sort of cushion
There
for
is,
inflation and for those
there,
things.
there are
But
contingency numbers built in, there just weren't enough in this, and I completely understand council's frustration, and believe me, we have talked to the engineers about this. Jesus and I were just as shocked by the numbers, and I think Chris was too. I can't explain why the bids were so different. We only received 3 bids, which I would hope to have more this next time around. I do seem to recall there was some conversation at the timing of the bid delivery was around the July 4th holiday. That may have affected some people being able to get their information together and get it submitted to us. We talked about on the backside if we needed to extend the bid time so that people could get additional contractors for electrical or dirt work or whatever to get some of that competition driven. So it's just a conglomeration of issues that brings us to where we're at, but I do appreciate you all and your team coming here and listening to the frustrations, because we have an opportunity to do something for Rome that hadn't been done in years. And then it's kind of like in your personal life, you make a decision and you expect within 6 months to see some movement. In a government, it can be different. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. And we talked about the modular building for a year before we had anything done there. And there are just some frustrations that I don't think can be fully addressed today, but we are working, and I do appreciate Chris's willingness to go out and massage the numbers and talk to the contractors and try and figure out what did we not do, what can we do better, what can they do differently to get that in, because the bond that was sold for this west plant was 11 million. Their OPC was under that, so we added a little to the bond just to make sure. We just could not, to Mrs. King's point, anticipate some of the changes in the federal government that have come around in the last 18 months that have affected everything from car purchases to cell phones to steel to labor to just the unknowns that we didn't know about the site. And what was it, 15 feet we had to dig down for the basins that you were talking about to remove dirt potentially to set so that it would be solid and it wouldn't fluctuate and have those things fall over. I mean, it was a lot of dirt that had to be moved that we didn't know, nor would we have known from when the site was originally put in 1999. It doesn't have those type of basins there. It has the round clarifier, and then it has the drying beds. This is much more sophisticated than what we currently have in place. So it's disappointing all the way around, but we are doing our dead level best to push it forward as quickly as we can. And we put pressure on Chris and his team, and he has felt that pressure.
so with the items that you were taking out of the contract, what does that do for our future for the wastewater plant? What does that do?
So we got rid of a couple of items. First thing were the EQ basins. In reality, those basins in the future could just be added as a expansion to the plant, and them being there, developers or whatever would just, they wouldn't have to pay for that. We just transition it in and we're good. The other thought was an EQ basins for rain events, but we're already fixing sanitary sewer in Old Town. So I talked to Chris and I said, well, the clarifier, the part that processes the plant is almost double the size. The original one's 25 foot. This one's 40 or 45?
40.
40. So it's pretty big compared to the old one we have. And that would create room for high peak and high demand times. So we got rid of the steel, anything electrical going to those 2 tanks to reduce the cost there. The dirt moving was especially a big one. He mentioned that. And I said, well, we have the lagoons. Let's try to get rid of some of the costs and throw that there. The
maintenance building.
The maintenance building, that's we don't need that, especially to meet the budget. And then the foundation work, though, we did talk about that. We have to go down and dig what would be considered the foundation for future growth. Because once the tanks are in, you don't want to go in there and disturb the ground because you're going to be too close, and then it'll cause erosion or unlevel the tanks or whatever it might be. So the foundation will be there.
when a developer decides to come in, he will have to pay, or they, or whoever will have to pay for, the 2 tanks we took out. And then all the hardware and electrical and equipment that goes into that. So it doesn't hurt us on the fact of production of what we can do. We'll still be fine on that end. It's just like growth, like the East plant. They're just gonna have to add a couple components and we'll just have to adjust on that end.
I didn't understand chemical, you said it too fast, like chemical nutrient removal, and you said something about
Yeah.
biological,
Yes.
like which one are we going with?
We transitioned to chemical, right? So the biological had a lot of additional, electrical components. So to reduce the amount of electrical components and transition to just using chemical instead for that nutrient removal, that was the goal.
So, I mean, I get that you're changing it to get rid of some of the electrical components, but I feel like the electric company should not be price gouging us, but I guess there's no way to control that.
And I
Another
guess,
way,
just, I'm curious about like, what is biological and what is chemical, like, what are we doing? What do we have now?
I mean, right now, we don't have anything. That is for future growth. As the plant grows, your requirements dumping or discharging into a river become more critical because of the environment. That's all it is. So right now, we're so small, we don't even do chlorine removal, nothing like that. As we grow, the requirements get stricter and stricter and stricter. And that was, again, something planning for the future, but seeing the prices and everything, there's other options and we'll go with other options.
So the East plant doesn't have anything on it.
East plant doesn't need it.
Yeah, so I'll back up and it kind of segues to my next slide anyhow, is about the discharge program. So nutrient removal is kind of the key thing. Don't worry about the biological chemical. It's just how that removal happens. But nutrient removal is focused on phosphorus, right? So it's back to the phosphorus is one of those key elements that allow biological life to grow in places we don't want it to grow, is in downstream in the streams, making algae blooms and things of that nature here. So TCQ, we were working with them and they have now let us know that and I guess solidified that the future phase 2 and 3 are going to have phosphorus removal requirements. And so that's that we planned the infrastructure to be able to infrastructure when you need it in the future. So you like Jesus was saying, there's basins that you need in the future. We have a path forward to double to from your phase right now is 0.15. We have a plan to get to 0.3. We have a plan for you to get to 0.6. Right. So you have a future plan on where the next 2 phases go, as well as how to meet the state's requirements for discharging in the stream that Jesus has to do on a daily basis.
So at the end of the day, you submit all the other bids are submitted in. They come back high. Where are we at?
Yeah, so I think it comes back to how high are they, right? Are they within the budget that Amanda has set aside? Or are they within ability where we can talk with them and value engineer down a little bit to get in the budget? Like in this case, they were just so out of bounds that we didn't even take that approach.
That's what I'm saying. If they come back like this again, where are we at?
we'll work with our financial advisor. We'll look at the current rate structure that's within the utility fund to see if there are some additional ways to finance that. Because we have a set hard amount on the bond. There's no exceeding that. If we have to
That's what I'm,
augment it from some other areas, we have some money in fund balance in the utility fund, not enough to cover. We do have some money that could come from future revenues in the system that we could allocate towards that payback. There are some options, but we need to vet those out a little bit more before we come forward. Our entire goal and hope is to get this within budget. That is what we've been working toward. I think we can get there. But I will also remind council, when I came in 2.5 years ago, the first set of OPC that I looked at for this plan to replace it were about $4 million. because of cost escalations to where we're at now, we're in the $11 million range. So we've taken the
Obviously,
big
we're in
step.
the $13 million.
Well, no, we're not. We have scaled that back, and I think that we have, put in parameters that allow for future developers to come in and help bear some of that cost that made sense at the front end of the bidding when we went out for this, but then as the bids came in, it didn't make as much sense. And so we've removed those components, and we'll add those back in as TCEQ absolutely requires it, and as developers come in and push us over that threshold of however much discharge rate we're going to have, where we need to implement those more stringent phosphorus requirements, et cetera. So, it's not the best news, but we also knew that we didn't have $22.5 million that it was over to fund. So we've gone back out and we've worked with Chris to try and find a path forward, and that's about all we can do at this moment.
So these numbers that you're showing tonight is with all the goodies still in.
Yes,
You're not showing numbers with all removal.
no,
Okay,
that's the next bid package. We'll go out with the less steel, as Mr. Dominguez says. Go ahead, Jesus, jump in.
I was gonna say something to that too, and to Mr. Johnson's point is, if these bids, the question that wasn't asked, if these bids come in way lower than expected, we also have bid alternates, or alternative, options. Some of the stuff we're taking out, the bids come in lower, and there's money in there, we're gonna put it back in. I think the biggest thing is gonna be, as we all discussed, is more people coming in the bid to drive the prices down, competition.
I thought these numbers were after they removed everything.
No, sir, no.
We've taken an appetite suppressant to get it, to get it lower. But like he said, I think when we submitted these bids was probably the worst possible time to go out for bids that we could have ever chosen. So most Jesus, I think when we get more people in the box bidding, it'll drive the prices down. So, but we toned this thing down, took out all the shiny stuff. And bottom line up front, we still gotta replace this sewer plant. I don't care what we do, we gotta get it done.
Well, then I'd like to just clarify, to the mayor's point, some of the stuff that we have in the bid, the original, are things that we are going to need. They can be postponed a little, but with the bids that we went out for the first time and under the parameters from which we thought we would get the bids, we still anticipated being in budget. We were surprised when they came in. So let's back up, let's remove some of those components that could be added later, and let's bid again and give them more time to get more diversity, more contractors involved, so that we get more than 3 bids and we get some folks that can come in and get this done for us.
Correct, yeah, I understand that, but like I was saying, I thought this
No,
was
sir.
after,
Yes,
and that's
yeah, good
what
question.
I was having a problem with.
Sure.
So if the bids come in lower and when we're like, oh, well, let's add these things that we need. Do we have to go out for bid again? Okay,
They're called add alternates. They're included in the line under. So you get your base bid for what you absolutely have to have, and then there's the things that we can add back in, and based on, let me make up some numbers. If the plant comes in at $8 million for the base, and we've got $2 million worth of add alternates, we're gonna shove them all in there. Because we're still within budget, and we still are setting ourselves up for the future. If the bids come in at 10 million and our bond is 11, well, then we'll look judiciously at what's going to be the biggest bang for the buck for the staff. And then we will take our cue from Mr. Dominguez, because he's the expert in the field.
We'll get what we can get. All right, we have no more questions. Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate it very much. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, guys.
All right, moving on. Item number D, update from the 89th legislative session. Brenda?
Thank you, Mayor. We've got another presentation. Brooke's going to retrieve her keyboard, and we are going to pull some things up for you. You may notice when you get home, I did forward you, I have a much longer multi-page document from TOS, our city attorney, that they put forward some things that they know were going to affect the city of Rome and other cities within Texas based on the legislative session. I have taken this and boiled it down to the very basics that I think that are going to be of importance to you, but if you have an interest to read the full document, it's in your inbox. You know that we just concluded the 89th session. the full session and we are now in special session. I don't know what's going to come to us as a result of said special session. It is often not good things for us, but we will see how that works as we go through. When you look at some of the changes that we have highlighted here for you, can you go to the next slide, please, Sam? Senate Bill 1883 is an adoption or increase of impact fees. This is something that will require some minor changes to our internal processes. So every 3 to 5 years, you are supposed to review your impact fees as it relates to things like development, inspection fees, permitting fees, et cetera, on down through that list. Whatever is allowable and on our fee schedule is what we're allowed to charge based on council authority. It's just the legislature is cleaning up some of that, and now they have that you cannot increase your impact fees any quicker than every 3 years. We've been on a 3 to 5 year rotation with our engineering firm. We are due for another update. It's been 5 years, so it's time for us to look at that in 2026 coming up to bring that to council for some review. One of the things they've added in here is you have to have a capital improvement plan. Now, Rome has a very rudimentary capital improvement plan that was put together by Kimley Horn. Then in the past couple of years, we've worked with council to put one together with our budget document that we just need to strengthen a little bit, and we'll be well within compliance with that particular component. One of the other things is as we've mentioned before, we want to continue to review that capital improvement plan during our budget cycle and during our budget retreats every year. In that we had just spent so much time dealing with infrastructure and capital items over the past 18 months, we did not focus on that this year because we don't have any additional capacity to take on any additional projects. So our capital improvement plan will just carry over until we are finished with some of the current 3 items that you just got the update from Kimley Horn. Does that make sense? So, one of the things that I've noticed that the current legislative session is doing is they are bootstrapping that requirement to have a financial independent audit to everything they can possibly crosswalk it to. That's not a bad thing. I will say to you though, that one of the, unintended consequences of that requirement, we're going to talk about here in just another moment on the budget and the tax rate. But there are a limited number of outside accounting firms that bid for small cities audits. If you don't have a firm from which to handle your audit, you can't get it completed. So we fortunately have contracted with MWH out of Wichita Falls, but they are now inundated with a lot of small cities and they are running behind in getting some of this done. Rome is in the process of the 24 audit. We finished the 23. We had a clean audit. You heard from them earlier this year on that particular issue. The 2024 audit is in process. We are working with all of our outside consulting firms, but it will not be in place and finished by September the 1st, which is the new requirement for some budget and tax rate issues, which we're going to talk about in our next presentation. However, you'll see that they also type the independent financial audit here from an outside CPA firm that in order to increase any of your impact fees, you also have to have that done too. So it's just kind of a whole bunch of things being brought together. A lot of the administrative requirements to notice and post the fees will all be handled on the back end by staff, so it's not a council issue.
And what penalties do they?
You can't upgrade your fees if you don't have those items.
Okay, so that's the only penalty
Yes.
if you're like,
Yeah, but
oh, we don't have our.
Like I said, when we look at this next year, we're already going to have 24 done and 25. So that's not going to be the issue.
And we're keeping us upping our fees.
So when you look at the next slide, under taxing and revenue, Senate Bill 1453 is basically just changing some titles on the TNTs, or the truth and taxation sheets. It changes the wording. I think it makes it a little bit clearer for people to understand said wording and said worksheets. And I'm going to tell you, having for the past 10 days spent quite a bit of time in our TNT worksheet, that there is no amount of title changes that's going to fix that for the average person. This is a very complex document. The formularies are extremely complex. If we did not have, to Mr. Loftus's point, specialized software from which to do this, no individual working in local government is going to be able to hand pencil this in. So I appreciate them trying to make it clearer, but I think it's an exercise of futility to a great extent. It also sets specific motion language for approval for the ad valorem tax calculation. All of that, again, will be handled on the backside by staff. When you look at Senate Bill 1025, another thing to try and increase transparency and make it very clear, it's much like the smoking will cause cancer on your cigarette packs. Any ballot language now has to say this is a tax increase. Most people understand that, but they want to make darn sure that people get it. So they tightened up that language.
I have a question about that. I remember sometimes, okay, I don't have the right words, don't judge me. But I remember sometimes with the school district when we would go out for things. And even though, yes, it technically was a tax increase, it wasn't gonna wind up costing, okay, tell me what am I trying to say?
So this is where, to me, I think we've got cross purposes with the legislature. They want people to understand that if they're voting for it, it's a tax increase, but what they don't explain, nor do they give us the ability to explain, is it's not going to raise your taxes. The numbers themselves might have changed in this column, but what you're going to pay in your actual tax rate is not going to change. And so what I have done in previous cities is, and we did that here when we looked at trying to go above the voter approval rate, we posted an ad right next to it that said, yes, this exceeds the voter approval rate. However, it does not change your tax bill. It's a distinction without a difference for some people. And this is another way that, in my opinion, some of the legislators who are not fond of local government.
I'm sorry, did you say legislators?
Yes, as they,
You heard it right. I missed nothing, go ahead, we'll talk later.
I think that they, most definitely are trying to get to a particular area, but they are not the boots on the ground. And they don't realize that this is an ineffective change.
I just wanted to know if I was for this or not.
It's here or there.
Okay.
I think it's another attempt at Austin I think there is a concerted effort by different lobbyist groups to influence Austin to do away with small municipalities.
Which
We cost them money and that's what's happening.
What's so funny about all of that, though, is they don't want to deal with the citizenry. They want that layer. They want us to be the layer of the intersection between them and Austin, but they also don't want us here because they want to have greater care and control over finances and taxes and other things, which if they would just work hand in hand with your local governments, life would be a lot better in Austin and in the local area, but that's not been the trend.
Okay.
So if they say this is a tax increase and we're not changing say it's 55 cents. We're not changing that, but because of the value of your home, it's considered a
There are
tax.
so many variables in that, Mrs. Ty, that I could take 2 hours talking to
You
you.
gotta be a CPA to understand that.
It's a complex issue, I will tell you, but
Bottom
yes,
line up front is when you get your tax bill every year, if it doesn't change, you didn't have a tax increase. The numbers, they got these numbers that work around. It's very complex, but the bottom line is to people like us, is when I get my tax bill, did it go up or did it go down?
I completely understand that. I think what the average person who gets their tax bill, they look at the bottom line. And the city often gets lumped in with every other taxing entity that's in there, and we are the easiest to contact, and so we get a lot of the concerns. And I get that, because I'm an average taxpayer too. I have a home that I pay taxes on, and if I hadn't dug into this years ago, as I was doing analysis for local governments, I wouldn't know this information either. And I wouldn't expect the average person to know, because this is not where you live. This is not your job. It's my job. So we try and make it as user-friendly as possible, and to me, SB 125 it's a feel-good bill that is not going to change anything. One thing that did come that was helpful for us, which shocker, was a competitive bidding threshold change. You'll see Senate Bill 1173 changed, where we have to get 3 competitive bids from 50,000 to 100,000. And given that you can't hardly buy a car for $50,000 anymore, that does make a difference to us, so that we are able to do things a little more efficiently internally. That doesn't mean that we just contact one person and say, hey, here's your bid. But we don't have, it's just a different threshold from which to look through. When you look at the taxing and revenue continued, you'll see where the local government committee spent its time out of the Senate with Mr. Betancourt. Required annual audits as of September the 1st. So this is the one that we're going to talk about now and that we will talk about in the next one. This was a bad bill for municipalities.
That's the same guy that killed our water district.
This one requires, now there was already a law on the books that cities needed to perform their annual audits within 180 days of the end of the fiscal year. So our fiscal year ends on September 30th. Cities generally wanted to get all their audits done and to council by the end of March so that you're within that 180-day window. So not only was that a state law, but Rome had previously passed an ordinance that also required that. That's why you've seen some traction a while back on social media about us not meeting the audit requirements. And they were technically correct. However, at that time, there was no penalty for not meeting the audit requirements. And so Mr. Betancourt's committee has come back and put in some teeth to that issue now. Again, I will tell you, when I came here, we were getting an audit, but it was not an in-depth audit. We are now getting an in-depth audit. And so, you know, if they don't dive into the weeds of how deeply are you actually monitoring and watching these audits, a city can pay $5,000 for an audit and you're going to get it. Oh yeah, that looks good. Check it off and send it back. We have now sent in all of our funds, all of our information, fund balances, utility fund, Hotmo, everything, our personnel, payroll, our IRS, everything is all audited now. Our current audit is no longer $5,000. It is closer to $25,000. But I am getting an in-depth review of the city of Rome's finances, and we are getting well set up for the future. But when you go from here's 2 or 3 pages to here's 25 pages in your audit, it takes longer to get that done. So while we're doing this and upping the level of scrutiny to our finances, we are also getting our financial house in order on the back end with all of our new upgrades to our financial software. So we're doing a lot of really good things, but it's caused some delays. So this is one that is going to affect us, and we're going to talk about in the finances. No new revenue rate was added so that if you do not have your audit approved within that 180 days, then you are restricted to your no new revenue rate for the next fiscal year. You are not able to adopt anything above that. So I'll talk to you about it a little bit more, but this gives you kind of the impetus from which the discussion we need to talk about for our budget and tax rate for 25-26. All right, one piece of good news for our residents was Senate Bill 4 did pass, which raised the homestead exemption from 100,000 to 140,000 on homes, with the state ostensibly providing any funding shortage to the school districts. Having worked in a school district and having prepared their budget for many, many, many years, I'm going to be really interested to see how this rolls out. So we will see how that comes and whether it's actually funded, the delta by the state. I have my reservations. So moving on to zoning and land use, we do have a change in the disannexation of certain areas. One of the things that we'll be working very closely with our city attorney on is when applications are presented to us, you had to be, used to be say you had to be a qualified voter. They now changed that to property owner because a lot of people will own property within your jurisdiction, but they're not a qualified voter in your area. So the development lobbyists got this changed so that they could, as the property owner, petition for de-annexation. So we'll keep an eye on this one. When you look at HB 24 for notice and protest procedures for zoning changes, this is mostly administrative. But it does change the protest threshold from 20 to 60% within 200 feet. So this is mostly on the back end for us. We've got one more slide on additional bills on the HB 1522 for the Open Meetings Act. This now, instead of it being 72 hours, it requires 3 business days notice. Previous cities I worked for, we would post on a Friday, we'd have the meeting on a Monday. This isn't really going to impact us. We post no later than Monday, close of business. You still have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday as the full 3 business days for the notification. So this is not going to change anything that we're doing. It does require a physical copy of the budget when discussed or adopted. That is on our website. I've added all that information. You all have been given physical copies of it. One has been on file with the city secretary, so we have met those requirements. One of the other ones that's just come in on HB 198 talks about firefighter cancer screening. Once we get 5 years of employment for our teams under our belt, we will be required to provide them with that annual free cancer screening. We will look to the TCFP to give us those directions and what those screening requirements are, and I'll work with Scott to make sure that we're compliant. Any questions on some of those legislative changes that have come about? Well, it will remain to be seen what else comes our direction, because I do hear that there are some rumblings of some other things that may not be any more beneficial, but we'll wait.
Remember, Austin is not a friend. All right, moving on. Item number E, the budget discussion for fiscal year 24, 25, 25, 26.
So Mayor, if we could combine E and
Yeah,
F, I
E and
think
F.
that would be best if you want to read that into the record.
Recommend that.
Okay.
We are combining E and F.
So looking here at our budget and our tax rate for the coming year, I'm going to try and keep this high level. We are compressing some of our processes that would generally come in September to the August timeframe. At least that's what I'm recommending to council. Your budget assumptions with your base budget are the same as before. The only difference that is on the slide there is that the property tax information has now been provided to me by the county for the tax rate. So I have that to give to you this evening, but so far we haven't changed any of the base numbers. We will have all of that updated for you at your next meeting on the 28th, because we will need a decision on budget and tax rate on the 28th in order to be ahead of the September 1st new law that comes in, that if we want to adopt the voter approval rate, which we absolutely have to do in order to accommodate the debt that we have already issued, and we now need to pay the principal on said debt for the next year, we have to adopt the budget and the tax rate at our next meeting so that we get that passed before the 9/1 new law. Does that make sense? I explained that very well. So go to the next slide, please, Brooke. So this looks at the current tax rate history from 1994 coming forward, and you will see if you just look at the last couple of outer numbers, the tax rate for last year, the total tax rate was 0.618767. And one of the things that I explained to you all when we had last year's budget and to the community members is that that 0.618 number was the current interest on the bonds that would be due in this fiscal year, and that the number would change the next year when we were required to pay principal. So the 773,667 number is all in interest and principal on the bonds. This is your voter approval rate. When we look at what we're going to pass and what we're not going to pass, you have 3 options. You have the no new revenue rate, you have the voter approval rate, and you have the de minimis rate. And the de minimis rate is meant to generate an additional $500,000 in funding for particular projects. However, staff is recommending the voter approval rate, just like we did last year. So while it does change the tax rate, that was communicated, that was discussed and explained over last fiscal year, and in this one, this is all driven by the bonds. If you will look at the next rate, please. So to make this a little bit easier to understand, your maintenance and operations, or your M&O rate, is what we use to pay for salaries, electricity, office supplies, health insurance, et cetera, on down the line. Last year's M&O rate was roughly 0.25. This year's M&O rate is 0.21. So it goes down slightly because your debt has gone up slightly. This 0.25 versus the 0.21 will generate the same approximately $500,000 for operations that it generated last year. So this is not an increase in this line. Does that make sense? You'll go to the next one. You will see that the debt did change. That extra 20 cents, or the shift, if you will, in the 20 cents is going to go to the principal that now has to be paid on the debt. Both of those numbers together equal your voter approval rate. So if you look at this slide, this is a side-by-side comparison of the current fiscal year coming of 26 and the previous fiscal year of 25. You will see that, I've got listed there the property tax rate that we're recommending, which is the voter approval rate. The maintenance and operations number goes down, the interest and debt rate goes up, but it stayed the same at the voter approval rate. The no new revenue rate is 0.58. If we do not pass the budget and the tax rate and it is protested and we have to adopt the no new revenue rate, that extra funds that we have to use to process for debt is going to have to come out of fund balance. That's $500,000. And we need to keep that in fund balance. Okay. If you'll look, the de minimis rate definitely changed from last year to this. Our certified taxable value also changed. It was slightly larger last year than this. But that number is also affected by the amount of money that we collect in sales and use tax. You will recall that we subsidize our budget through sales tax. So the higher the sales tax number that dumps into your budget to pay for operations, it affects every one of those numbers. Last year was about $500,000. This year is it's almost 600,000. In the same instance, that 600,000 that we give back to the residents to lower their tax rate, we also give that same $600,000 back to the county to lower your county portion of your tax rate. Excuse me. So when you look at sales and use tax and the 2% that we're allowed to legally collect, excuse me, half of that is rebated in taxes for your county rate and for your city rate. So we're living on half the sales and use tax that some other cities live on. Okay. You'll also see that the city debt secured by property taxes changed considerably from 25 to 26 because that is the additional payment we have to make according to the principal and the interest added in this year. Questions on that? So when you look at this next, sorry.
So when you, let me go back. Okay, so the no new revenue rate of 0.58, I mean, that's essentially getting rid of the M&O and we're just paying interest. I mean,
So the way that these numbers shake out, yes, that would take everything that you would normally get for maintenance and operations right off the table.
I just assumed that we couldn't do that, but.
Yes, and that is a logical assumption. So when we have our taxing rate set up the way we do, with so much going back to the county and so much going back to the residents to lower that tax rate out of sales tax, that affects our M&O rate. They're all fungible and it's all a movable number. And I'm telling you, I've got a spreadsheet in here that the county puts together for us. We have access to that spreadsheet, so I can go in and double check numbers and make sure that we're clearly understanding it. And all of those affect how much our M&O rate is going to be. And so the more sales tax that we collect, that drives down that rate. The bigger the tax basis it gets, it drives down that rate. I mean, you can get to the point where your M&O rate is so small because it's being subsidized or funded from other areas, which in theory is good. The problem comes in is what happens if the economy crashes and your sales tax doesn't die? Sales tax is what's called income elastic. It changes based on all of those varying factors. And while you may have seen the article that came out in the Messenger, Decatur, Bridgeport, and Rome last month had the greatest sales tax collections. And yes, we are on pace for this fiscal year to exceed the sales tax revenue that I have budgeted in here for income. I'm loath to raise it because what if we miss it one year? And I've recommended to you all that we expend funds that we don't have. So we're better off to be conservative. It just means that because the way our tax rate is set up and our structure is so low and we have so much coming in to subsidize the M&O, that portion of our funding structure that pays for our operations is very small. And it is affected by too many other outside variables that we have no control over. So on one hand, it looks like a great windfall, seems like a wonderful thing. But if the sales tax dies off by $500,000, where do I make up the difference?
So, kind of change the subject slightly. So the sales tax that we return to the county, I think I've asked this question in the past. Supposedly it's reflected on our bill, how much it actually reduced our property taxes, right?
Yes, sir,
Okay, so if that is the case, when I look at this M and O tax rate, and this is essentially half of the sales tax that's covering our M and O kind of. I mean, should that effectively equal the amount that it's actually saving us?
it's a great question, but it's a little more complex on the formulary. So roughly what the city retains annually in sales and use tax, I have budgeted $1.45 million. That's our portion. If you divided that into the quarters and you looked at the additional funds that we would have retained, we're leaving about $1 million to $1.2 million on the table by rebating it in the property tax reduction and giving the rest of it to the county. If we had $1 million or $1.2 million back in our budget for operations, we could afford police officers, we could afford firefighters, we could afford these things that the community is asking us to provide. But there's only so many buckets to take it from. And while property tax reduction is a great thing, nobody wants to pay more property taxes than they have to, there's still only so many sources that a city can use to raise funds by. And every year the legislature brings that ability and puts more parameters on us that make it more difficult. And then the residents get frustrated because we can't provide the services, but we don't have the taxing ability or the levers to pull to fund the city. So, I've talked to staff about this, but if you think about what we send back out in property tax reduction at both the city and the county level, that's $1 million to $1.2 million. That's a significant number for us. When right now, our ad valorem, our property tax rate is generating $500,000 for operation.
Didn't we, I'm sorry, Randall, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Didn't we talk about?
I sure did.
Okay.
So it's
I
a
want to
complex issue.
that I'm not even sure how to start.
So
Emergency service district
talked about emergency service.
as a way to not have to get back crime control districts.
So yes, I did talk to Carmen about that, and the advice I received from him was that you would have to put on the ballot to get the voters to approve the property tax reduction elimination, which would raise their tax rates because they're no longer going to be subsidized from the sales tax. And then you have to get them to approve to reallocate that to a CCD or crime control district or a streets fund or something in like 1/8 and increments, which he wasn't sure was such a great idea for him. So it just seemed like it would be to me, it seemed logical to take property tax reduction and say, look, we'd like to take this $0.50 and redirect it to crime control to pay for public safety. That's easily understandable for people. But because of all of the legal hoops that you have to go through to get us from point A to point F, I'm not sure we get there.
Huge thing worth the squeeze
Then it will become worth the squeeze, but
later, it said.
to do it now is a whole lot less, torturous. Boyd went through that, but once our tax base increases and we start to see businesses and others come in, it's gonna be harder and harder to get that back. Then when you multiply that by the fact that all the cities voted to give sales tax to the county to lower your county tax, it doesn't help us on either end. And that also requires a countywide vote in order to repeal that, is what I've been told. They have talked about it at the mayor's coalition meeting, but that seemed like a little bit of a bridge too far just yet with the water issues that we're dealing with. So when you look at I'm sorry.
So one more time. De minimis,
Yes.
voter approval. Voter approval, you don't really have to have approval.
So
That's
That's
the,
what's already
that's
been
the
approved.
limit that you can go without
Correct.
approval.
As long as you adopt at or below the voter approval rate, it is not petitionable. Once you exceed that voter approval rate anywhere from there to the de minimis, then yes, they can submit a petition. And as we've learned, it takes about 35 to 40 voters to submit a petition to get it on the ballot, and then it becomes extremely misunderstood after that. 2 budgets ago, we tried to do that and allocate it towards road repairs, and it did not pass. So we were required to pay $6,000 to the county to refund checks to folks. So to go to the next slide, please. So when you look at our recommendation for the next fiscal year, it would be to adopt that voter approval rate of 0.773667. You'll see that the de minimis rate is listed there, which is considerably higher than what it was last year and the year before, but all of that is going to hinge on the debt. And as we talk about the budget and ways that we can ameliorate that issue, if you'll recall, all these projects that we're currently funding with property tax really ought to be coming out of the utility fund. So if there is any additional capacity in the utility fund, we need to talk about having utility fund reimburse general fund for some of that. Not all of it, because it can't absorb it, but some of it to deal with some of the issues that we need on the operations side for costs, operational costs that we're not being able to meet at the moment. I will have that ready for you at your next meeting on the 28th. Unfortunately, we will have Mayor Crenshaw out and Mrs. Ty out, so I need to make sure all 4 of you are here. If we do not approve the budget at the next meeting and the tax rate, then we will be required to adopt that no new revenue rate, and we will need to plan on taking $500,000 out of fund balance to service the debt.
I would humbly ask council to please support the voter approved rate at the next council meeting. I believe, yeah, the budget's gonna be kind of tight, but we'll make it work. And I think we've asked enough of the taxpayers over the last couple of years, so I would highly recommend approving the voter approved rate.
I don't have an issue with approving it tonight, if that's the
So we
case.
have some requirements that we
Okay.
have to go through legally of, we have to notify and know many days before this. And so what I would need tonight is a roll call vote on setting the tax rate at the voter approval rate number, establishing the next tax hearing or the tax hearing for the public and for the budget, which would be on your August 28th meeting. So there's some specific wording that needs to be read into the record. I would need you all to cast your vote by person and sign the form. I did call our contact at the appraisal district today, and he said we are not the only city taking this approach. I've told you before, we're not the only city that are still working through audits. Most of the cities in Wise County that are small, other than Bridgeport and Decatur, are still working through their audits. And so that's why that has been the recommendation from CPA, your attorney, et cetera, to get your budget and your tax rate approved before the September 1st deadline. Next year, we will have all of our ducks in a row and this will not be an issue. Any questions? No, that's a lot to throw at you. And I know that that is a compressed time frame because we generally approve the budget at the first part of September.
I call, is anyone wants to make a motion to adopt the roll call vote?
I make a motion to set the tax rate at the voter approval rate 0.773667 and schedule the required public hearing at 8/28/25 at 6 p.m.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, now we have a vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. All right, unless the council has any further discussion, do I have a motion to adjourn? Jimmy?
No, I need to talk a little bit. I don't know about what, somebody distracted the conversation.
All right, well,
I made the motion to adjourn.
do I have a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. All right, meeting's adjourned, 7:34.
Thank you, council.
Don't leave them.
Yeah, you've got to sign our form so we can get it to Mr. Law.
Rare form tonight, Josh.
You can get it on.
Got an allergy, so I said, what the?
All right, just sign.